if they have questions or something, if they want to participate. How's that work?
I don't know exactly how it looks like on the viewer's end, but there's a Q&A thing that they should be able to write questions into.
Okay.
Can you write
if
questions into
they're looking at it, if they're looking at it on YouTube, it's just a YouTube screen.
Yeah, if it's YouTube, then they're not going to be able to submit questions. In that case, I think I'll just put up my email or just say my email, and we can do it that way.
Perfect. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun. 13 people watching so far. Good. If they have questions or something, if they want to participate. Oh, we're on. How's that work?
I don't know exactly how it looks like on the viewer's end, but...
All right.
Great. There must be like a slight delay, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I'll just put up my email or just say my email. And is that it that way? Is that me or is that?
No, that's you.
Oh, that was me, I think. Sorry about that.
Right, I'll be right back, okay?
Okay. Wow. We have a lot of viewers.
I love it. Welcome. And we're live already, right? Is that right?
We are live, so don't do anything embarrassing.
Well, hi, guys. We'll see you in just a minute, everybody.
So we're going to start in 3 minutes at 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, noon Eastern. So the plan is to start off with a short 5-minute set, as a global sangha in the cloud.
Terrific.
Wow. Breathe, you're online.
Are you guys excited?
Sure, yeah. I really love this book. I'm really interested in what you guys have to say about it. Enjoyed it so much.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about it later, but I feel that this book is really kind of it emphasizes, it signifies like a new stage in Sister Dang Nghiem teaching.
Absolutely.
I really feel her confidence coming through in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we should say to the people that are just joining us, we'll be starting in earnest in just a minute or two.
The time has come. Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our first ever live discussion. We're going to begin with a short 5-minute sit as a sangha. I have a bell here. And so we'll begin the show at 9:05. Hello, everyone. We currently have over 200 viewers. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you enjoyed that short sit. It really, truly means a lot to myself and my co-hosts to see so many of you have tuned into our first ever show together. This is going to be an interactive show, and so if you're watching us through Google Hangouts, you can send in questions via the Q&A button that you should be seeing on the screen or somewhere near your screen. Or if you're watching us through YouTube, you can send in questions or comments to my email address, jason@parallax.org. That's PARALLAX.org. So let me first introduce my co-hosts. I'll begin with Nadia. Nadia Colburn is the editor at Anchor Magazine. She's also an accomplished writer, and she interviewed Sister Dang Nghiem not too long ago, so please check it out on stillharbor.com. Our second co-host is Soren Casil. He's a volunteer narrator. You may have heard his voice before for the Deer Park Dharmacast, which is available on iTunes and as well as dpcast.net. He's also a co-author and co-director of... Soren, can you remind me again?
Sure, I'm a comedy writer basically, but the main gig is my wife and I do a show called Broad Comedy, Katie Goodman's Broad Comedy.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that later. And I am Jason Kim. I'm the digital content director at Parallax Press. And I'm the man behind the curtain, behind all the social media that we do. And I'm so happy to join you all here today. All right, so in case you're wondering what the show is about, broadly the show is about, it's just an informal, free-flowing discussion of the life and lessons of Sister Dang Nghiem, otherwise known as Sister D. Sister Dang Nghiem is, I think, one of Thich Nhat Hanh's most inspirational students, and a person who's just so fascinating within the Plum Village tradition. She's the author of 2 books. Her first book, Healing, is a memoir about her overcoming of trauma, grief, and abuse. Her second book, which is coming out today, is called Mindfulness as Medicine, which is about Sister Dang Nghiem's incorporation of chronic illness and pain into her own mindfulness practice and to truly heal. So we'll be discussing Sister Dang Nghiem in general, but also how her teachings have touched each of our lives as a Sangha. All right, well, let's begin with, I mean, we all 3 of us have a personal connection to Sister D. So why don't you guys talk about a personal way in which Sister Dang Nghiem has touched your lives. Maybe it was an interaction or a little story that you have about her. Why don't we start with Nadia?
Okay, well, I first read Sister D's book. I think she was living in Mississippi when I first read Healing, and one of the first retreats I went to at Blue Cliff was a writer's retreat, or the creative artist retreats. So, and another practitioner there said, you need to check out this book. So I bought it and I took it home with me and I read Healing, and I was really, really moved by it and inspired by it. And I thought, wow, who is this Sister D? I'd love to meet her one day. And then, lo and behold, I went back to the monastery, and then one time I went back to the monastery, and there was this really stately nun whom I hadn't seen before, and someone kind of pointed to her and said, that's Sister D. I was like, wow, that's Sister D. So, and you know, her picture on healing, she looks really joyful and kind of almost sprightly. And she is really joyful looking, but she's also really majestic looking. Like she just has this presence. And so when I enter, she has a piece coming out in the next issue of Anchor also, talking about practice. And she starts the piece talking about a time that someone came to the monastery and started asking her questions about what is Buddhism. And she said, well, why don't you just come walk around the monastery with me and I'll show you what Buddhism is. And she was doing walking meditation with him. And then he was like, but what is Buddhism? She was like, this is Buddhism. We're practicing Buddhism. But what is Buddhism? And he kept on asking her questions like, what did the Buddha mean when he said this? What did the Buddha mean? She said, well, let's just practice walking meditation. If you practice, you'll discover what Buddhism is. And he was like, no, I want you to answer my questions. She said, well, maybe when you're ready, you can practice. Anyway, I'm telling that story because my first, just seeing Sister D across the room, I felt like that was a Dharma transmission, that her presence kind of radiates practice. And then over time, going back to Blue Cliff, I got to meet her and talk to her, and then I interviewed her for Anchor magazine and got to know her better through that, and going back and forth with her about the interview process, and then working with her on other pieces for Anchor. I've gotten to know her better. So yeah, she's amazing, and I think that she's been really she's so generous, and she's such a generous person. Her presence is generous, her teachings are generous, her books are generous, and she's been very generous also with me as I've shared my own practice and my own questions. She's been very generous in listening to me and being a Dharma teacher.
I know what you mean about saying that just watching her can be a transmission or can be a Dharma teaching. When I first got involved in this particular lineage, or the Plum Village Sangha, I was one of the people you were just describing who was filled with questions. I'd been studying Buddhism for 15 years or something at that point, but in other schools. And at that point, she was at Deer Park Monastery, and that was where I first started really learning about this tradition. And so I was that person who was just filled with questions all the time. And one of the monks actually said to me, you know, Zen is more of an observational art. You might want to just watch the monastics rather than asking them things. And this is true for all the monastics, of course, but Sister D was one that really jumped out at me at the time. Oh, there's so much to learn by just watching her. There's so much to learn by just watching her steps and watching her practice of mindfulness. It comes through so clearly. But I first met her. It was at Deer Park, and it was my first time there at Deer Park, and she happened to be the person who that weekend was taking kind of the new people there on for the mindfulness walks and things like that. So I got to spend a lot of time with her right off the bat, and I've always felt a connection with her because she's so welcoming, just thrillingly welcoming. And I went back the next weekend or so, and it was the weekend before Tet. If there are people watching who have never been to a monastery at or around Tet, you should try to. That's the New Year, the Lunar New Year, the Vietnamese New Year, which that weekend itself is quite a sort of festival at the monasteries. But the weekend before it is the one that I love, where they cook these earth cakes, moon cakes. Either of you guys remember what those are called? Either earth cakes or moon cakes, which is this rice that gets cooked with sweet stuff on the inside. It gets wrapped in banana leaves, and that whole packaging and wrapping is an art. And then they get boiled all night long in these massive pots. And so anyone there the weekend before spends all this time learning how to correctly fold the banana leaves and wrap them up and tie them up and all that. And then you stay up all night with the monastics, which is very unusual. You stay up all night with them with these big bonfires with pots over them boiling. Uh, and I was on the banana washing team with Sister D. And that's where I really felt like I met her, and she really started to feel like family. Um, and there's one point in particular where the people doing the folding of the banana leaves needed more banana leaves. We were falling behind at the washing table. And she went in to check on that, and then she came out and said, my friends, please work, how'd she phrase it? Please work knowing that you do not need to finish. There's no finishing, but we need to finish. and Zen being such a, the nature of Zen is that you have to, there's contradictions that you have to accept at the same time all the time. That was just a perfect, like, fun, from that moment on, I have felt being a devoted teacher, a devoted student of Sister D.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's so striking about Sister D, as Nadia was saying, is how majestic she is. She has a certain bearing that really, it's not by any means out of arrogance or anything, but she certainly has a gravitas to her that, but it's a friendly gravitas. She's really, she's teaching at every moment, right? And just like Thai actually, and so that's something that you see in her right away when you meet her. Unfortunately, I've never had a chance to meet her in person. Because she's now, I think, at Magnolia Grove, and I've never been down that way before. But I do know her through her books, through her teachings, through all of the lives that she's touched, and also I got a chance to talk to her over the phone leading up to this web show, just to explain to her what we're going to be doing and to describe to her. The reach and impact that she's had through her 2 books and also through her teachings at the monastery. And for me, what's so fascinating about Sister D is that she has a way of combining her personal experience, which is fascinating in its own right. If you didn't know, Sister Dang Nghiem was orphaned at a very young age. She grew up in a context of war in Vietnam and came to the United States under the Amerasian program. She was in the foster care system for a long time and eventually became a medical doctor at UCSF, one of the top medical schools in the United States. Then she went through a tragic personal loss with the loss of her partner and underwent a kind of transformation and joined Plum Village in 2000, I believe. And, she's been a nun ever since. And so for me, her story is extraordinary. It's unlike, anyone's story. But there is a way in which as she said to me over the phone, the story that I tell about myself and my life and all the experiences that I go through, the pain, the grief, the dealing with Lyme disease and psychological trauma, I'm telling the story of everybody. Everyone goes through these things. I'm not telling my story. I'm telling the story of everyone, and that really does come out in her teachings and in her writings, and also from the person that she truly feels. She lives she lives the concept of interbeing. That she sees the universe in her suffering, and vice versa. the other thing that really struck me about Sister D, just talking to her over the phone, was that I asked her, because of her condition, whether this has deepened her practice in light of our teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, or Thai's recent illness, and she told me that that was indeed the case. That in a way, when she's sitting there in the monastery, when she breathes deeply, she breathes even deeper than before, because she's breathing for Thai, and that her practice has really become deepened, not only as a result of her illness, but also Thai's illness, whom she's really close to. And so I think both teachers, both Sister Dang Nghiem and Thai, have a lot to offer for those of us who are sick or not sick, because as Sister D also said to me, you need to practice with what life gives you, right? You can't create. Mindfulness is about understanding and seeing everything for what it is, right? And if what that is if that reality is pain for you and illness, you need to incorporate that into your practice and breathe deeply. And so she really is a living embodiment of that, and it just comes out of everything she does. She never stops teaching, just like Thai. So yeah, that she's just such a powerful person. That's sort of my impression of Sister D. Let's see. Well, let's talk more specifically about her teachings and what she says about the Dharma and things of that nature. And so one of the things that's really interesting about her second book, Mindfulness as Medicine, is that it really expands on the traditional concept of the four immeasurables. So, and in the Theravada tradition, this is called also the four divine abodes, and there are a bunch of other names for it. But pretty much, if you don't know what that is, there are these four things that you probably heard of: metta or maitri, loving kindness; mudita, joy or appreciative joy; karuna, which is compassion; and the fourth is
upeksha.
Upeksha, yeah. Which one was that one again?
She refers to it as interbeing. A lot of times you hear it as letting go or equanimity, or I think interbeing is a good.
Yeah. And then she pretty much works with these four, and then adds another two for a total of six in her book, and she organizes her story along these six ways. The two that she adds are, I just want to phrase this correctly because she has a particular way of phrasing it. Healing and I believe it's one is healing and the other one is oneness. Is that right?
Well, the healing actually is how she refers to karuna, the compassion one.
Yeah.
She refers to that as healing. So the two that got added, which I think actually were added by Thai during a winter retreat 5 years ago or so, and she expands on them here. Trust and confidence is one of them, and reverence is the other one. Reverence as far as observance, I guess, looking at the world.
And respect, right? Reverence and respect.
Yeah.
And so, just in our practice, which of these practices speak to you, or which ones are difficult for you, or ones that you're working on? Because we're all works in progress, and so why don't you share your experiences with these practices?
Sure. For me, it's interbeing is the one I feel a little bit like that's a cop-out answer because they all kind of flow out of that one. It's like the mindfulness trainings. They're all, they inter-are.
Sister D puts interbeing as the first one, right? She reorders them and puts interbeing first, which is very interesting as the foundation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me it speaks to, I think it's from where, as I mentioned, I spent a good bit of time studying Buddhism in other schools before discovering this tradition. And Theravada and Japanese Zen, both of which are very oriented toward the kind of nirvana experience or enlightenment experience, if you will, and much more so than in a much more literal way than in the Plum Village tradition, though that's arguable. We could talk about that forever. So a big part of my practice is still working to directly experience the kind of oneness of the world. And my most common practice, besides sitting and besides being involved in sanghas, is looking at things like I live in New York City, so walking down the street or running through the park or something like that, passing people and saying in my mind, kind of you can't fool me. You're not a separate thing. And nope, you're not fooling me. You're not a separate thing. And that chair there, that's a concept of chair that's in my head. You're not fooling me, chair. You're not a separate thing. That's a chair. And so that's a practice that I spend a lot of time with. So I really enjoyed her whole section on interbeing. Really spoke to me.
Me too. I also think it's really interesting that this is a book about love, really, and it's a book about self-love more than anything else. But when we bring in the concept of interbeing, that distinction between loving another and loving yourself becomes less clear. And so reading this book, I really was reflecting a lot on the ways in which sometimes we have this kind of static idea of self versus other. And so we think our practice then should be, we should pay more attention to getting inside of the views of the other and loving the other more. But Sister D really teaches us that we can do that work of interbeing by also focusing on ourselves. And part of the kind of fallacy of the self-other is that we think there is this, solid self. And if we learn to bring more kind of attention and love to ourself, our sense of self also relaxes a little bit. And we can be more generous with ourselves, which then allows us to be more generous with others as well. So that was something that, I was really moved by in reading the book. But also because I do know Sister D and I know how generous she is. So to have someone like her really talking about the importance of self-care, self-love, that's all the more powerful. I think if you have some egomaniac talking about it, okay, well, it has less authority that I want to listen to. But
right, sure, yeah, and she did such an amazing job in each of them of relating it of directing it toward one's self first. The one that really grabbed me was in the interbeing chapter. She talks about meditation as deep listening, to which I never heard it put this way, and it made so much sense. If you're watching and you're not involved in a Plum Village tradition sangha, one of the things that's very specific to our sangha gatherings is dharma sharing, where you bow in and you share from the heart your own experiences, and you bow out. And during that time, everyone else in the sangha is listening very intentionally and very deeply and trying to sort of read between the lines and that kind of thing. And she refers to meditation in those same terms, that you are listening to the world that deeply, or you're listening to your own mind that deeply. And and that actively. And I never heard it put that way. I've been working with that ever since reading that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think. I mean, as you're saying, so right, all of these, immeasurables or whatever you want to call them, they all inter-are, right? Kind of like the 5 mindfulness trainings. I mean, you can't just practice one without practicing all of the others at the same time. But the one that really stands out for me is friendship, which is Sister Dang Nghiem interpretation of metta, maitri, or loving kindness. There are moments in the book where she describes some kind of episode that causes her a lot of physical pain and even psychological pain. So one example she gives is, she has an upset stomach, she's in the bathroom, and she's sending metta to her stomach. She's saying, oh, dear friend, I know you are trying. Thank you for trying, right? What really struck me about her understanding of metta is that it's being a friend to your body, right, and to your pain, right? And so to thank your body for trying, for trying to heal, is something that really opened my eyes to what Sister Dang Nghiem is talking about in terms of true transformation and healing, and understanding how we can incorporate pain into our practice, to be in awe of our bodies for trying to heal and to overcome our hurts, whether they are physical or psychological. And so, to send metta to your stomach, to send metta to others that have wronged you or hurt you in some way, and the way that Sister D does is just really profound, and I don't think I've ever encountered something like that before. To really be a friend to your body. Oftentimes we think of our bodies as things to be conquered or machines, to be well oiled. But for Sister D, the body is really your friend, right? Even when it hurts, it's still your friend. It's always there for you, and it's always trying, and that's very powerful, I think. We have a number of questions from the audience, which I'm delighted to see. So we'll try answering one question, or at least doing our best to talk about it in our own practice, because the three of us, we're just regular people, practitioners, doing our thing. So don't expect we were just sharing from the heart, and please. Your patience and your generosity in listening to us would be much appreciated. So let's see here. So the question toward Lauridsen, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and if not, please excuse my ignorance. The question is, how do I transform or let go of my own resentment in situations of psychological violence directed towards me? How do I transform or let go of my own resentment in situations of violence or pain inflicted upon me?
That's a great question. Well, I don't. Why did I try to answer this question? I don't know the answer, but I'm sure that Sister D does know the answer, so I'm going to try to channel her. But I think that she's a great example because she did have a lot of violence directed against her, and she. One thing I was reflecting on was her level of. She has an amazing balance between acceptance and a true desire and movement towards healing. So I think often we get afflicted with the second and the third and the fourth arrow meaning, Buddha talks about if someone shoots you in the arm with one arrow, then we should take the arrow out. But sometimes our psychology is such that we almost shoot ourselves again with another arrow because we start asking all these questions. Why me? Why did that happen? I'm so angry. What am I going to do? Right? And that just exacerbates the pain. And I was really reflecting on how little Sister D does that. I mean, I also have this kind of intellectual background, so I also ask a lot of questions. And Sister D doesn't seem to have those, like, why me? What should I do to get revenge? It's not fair. At the same time that she's always working in the direction of reconciliation, healing, peace, justice, and being a voice for women, for children, speaking out against abuse, violence, sexual misconduct, all of these things that you have to be extremely brave to speak out against. But that resentment doesn't seem to be there, and I think that comes from the deep practice that she has and the deep looking, the deep understanding that gets back to interbeing, to having compassion for the people who were in situations where they inflicted violence, and family members who were violent to her, but she's able to understand what their own suffering was and their own misperceptions, that they would, act in ways that were violent and inappropriate. And then the whole war in Vietnam, which she grew up amid, and Thai teaches us so much to be able to see the different sides, to have compassion for the soldiers, many of whom now are still suffering because of, the terrible things that they did that they probably really didn't want to do in that war. So that deep practice of deep listening and deep looking to oneself, to be able to then imagine other people's situations, that practice of interbeing, I think allows her to let go of some of that resentment, and at the same time really to be an advocate for real change, not just saying, oh, this is fine, the world is like this, that's just the way it is, but really to be moving towards healing and peace, not just for herself but for others as well.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I think also she's such a great example of, as we've talked about, of self-care and of taking care of herself. And I would say that's the key. That's the key ingredient. There is the thing that the hurt that you're feeling resentment about. Take care of that. Take care of that hurt. It's such an amazing section of her first book, Healing, when after she experiences this tremendous loss and goes to the monastery, and she talks about herself just wailing with tears around the clock, basically, and she describes the monastics there, the other nuns, taking care of her and teaching her how to take care of herself. Such a moving part of the book. So I think focusing on that hurt and taking care of that hurt makes the resentment less of an issue, because that hurt was was transformed into something useful. She mentions at the end of, I think it's the friendship chapter, that there's nothing is wasted. She was a doctor and then she was a nun, and it's not like the whole doctor part of her life was wasted because she changed direction. So it's, if one can learn and one can transform our hurt and our scars, that's how we grow.
Yeah. I mean, wonderful. I mean, the one thing I would add is, toward by asking the question, you are already beginning to transform. Understanding that you have this resentment, that you are being hurt or have been hurt, and that there's this underlying desire to transform. You are already doing the work of healing and transforming, and so it's to always remember that you're already beginning the healing process. You're already starting to transform bit by bit. You may not feel it right now, but believe me, and Sister Dang Nghiem would say this as well, that the sincere desire in you to transform and to heal yourself. That's where it begins, because starting with love of the self, of valuing who you are, and of everything that's gone right for you but also wrong for you. That's part of the healing process, a crucial step, first step in it. And so I send you much metta and friendship and kindness to you, because it takes a lot of courage to ask a question like that to a bunch of strangers. And so that tells me that your sincere desire to heal is already there. You just need to look deeper and to bring that out of you, because you're fully capable. You're already doing that work. So thank you for the question, Tord.
The most recent time that I saw Sister D, I was up at Blue Cliff, and they did there were breakout sessions at this weekend-long retreat, one after another for about 20-minute periods, and then we debrief and have another breakout session. And it was talking about a lot of really heavy stuff and a lot of real frustrations, and weighted topics. And as people were announcing the next breakout session, the people were saying the topics they were going to do, Sister D said for her part of that session, she said, I've decided that I'm going to sing lullabies. So if you'd like to lay on the floor and listen to me sing lullabies, please meet in this corner. And there were about 6 of us that just went, yes, that is exactly what we need right now.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So, let's see. What are some of your favorite quotes from Sister Dang Nghiem, or maybe some favorite passages that you have from anything that she's written? What's your favorite teaching?
I can say something that struck me as really interesting. I enjoy how I like her medical history, and that she doesn't dance around that at all. In her writing, she'll often say, well, this person was suffering from this at this time, and describe it medically. She mentions at one point mirror neurons in her new book, which are something that's gotten a lot of study in brain science lately. Kind of pathways in your brain that reflect that mimic the emotion of the person that you're talking to. So you're talking to someone and they're feeling down, and part of how our brain has evolved is, in order to relate to them and to have them feel that they're being related to, this kind of social evolution, we start to feel that emotion, and we'll show that emotion on our face and stuff like that. And that's called mirror neurons. And she brings that up at one point, and I had never thought about that. Like, I'd read about mirror neurons, but she brings them up as something else. In a way, it's it's another thing to try to be mindful of. Not only are you sitting trying to be mindful of your own experiences and your own emotions and your own mental formations, but when you're talking to someone else, being aware of you feeling their emotion that they're feeling. And then, of course, in an interbeing kind of way, supporting that emotion in yourself is also supporting it in them. I thought that was dazzling. I loved it.
I really appreciate the way Sister D incorporates just really personal details in her books and weaves them in with practice and with Dharma discussions, basically. So, I think that's really rare to have a Dharma teacher who's so forthcoming about her own personal experiences. And she talked about, after writing, well, I'll give an example just from this book for those of you who haven't read it. She talks about, for example, one day just having acute diarrhea. And there just aren't that many Dharma teachers who talk about, these kind of physical experiences. And I do think it's probably because she was a doctor, that she has this comfort with the body, that she's able to talk about the body so with such authority, you know, whatever's happening in the body. She talks about having acute diarrhea. She talks about massaging her ovaries and being worried that she's going through early menopause. That was something that I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I'm kind of like, oh, man, you're never going to have a baby again. And I just like totally gravitated to that part of the book, the kind of just woman to woman experience of connecting with our own fertility or then lack of fertility, and accepting our bodies as they are. And so when she's talking, just to go back to the diarrhea passage, she talks about, you know, really feeling sick and being in the bathroom and then walking to a Dharma discussion and someone saying to her, "Oh, Sister D, you're so beautiful. You're so peaceful. You know, you look like a model and a Buddha." And, you know, there's this funny juxtaposition between her experience knowing, you know, all the different levels of what's happening with her body and this image that people have of her as being just kind of perfect, which I have to say, even though I know her and she's been telling me that she's sick, it's still, when I'm with her, it's hard for me to really believe that she is in pain because she looks so composed and together. And when I'm in pain, I'm like, I can't sit still. And she's just like perfectly still. And so this book gave me, you know, so much insight into the kind of different levels of her experience and just gave me so much more respect for her practice and for her generosity in sharing her experiences with us. Because, you know, we all have diarrhea, and Ty has the wonderful, you know, going to the bathroom gatha that, you know, I now of course can't remember it, but that every part of our experience is part of our practice and part of the Dharma. So that was something I really appreciate about her book.
Yeah,
absolutely, and it makes the teaching so easy to relate to. You know, the applying it to a life very simply, not in general terms, but applying it to massaging your ovaries or whatever it might be. It brings it right down to earth, which is something Ty does incredibly well. Also in his writings, and a reason I think that Ty speaks to a American, I guess, community so well, is he's not afraid to share, and he's not afraid to speak on very grounded earth terms. And so it's fantastic to see Sister D taking up that tradition and that openness and that willingness to share without kind of embarrassment about sharing, you know, very personal things about yourself.
Yeah, and I'll just read a passage that I found to be the most I mean, there are of course many passages that spoke to me that I really like, but I'll just read this one as an example of that. Just, you know, everything is fair game for Sister D and for our practice, right? The passage is called "Hugging a Prostitute." While I was attending medical school in San Francisco, I often went to a Vietnamese restaurant in a dilapidated neighborhood. There were many drug users and prostitutes walking on the street. One night, as we were driving slowly away from the restaurant, I saw a woman walking in the direction of our car. She was just skin and bones, and her short skirt showed her scrawny legs. She was no older than in her 30s, and yet her facial skin was obviously discolored and unhealthy, despite the covering of makeup she had on. Her teeth were yellow and unsound, and some were already missing, which made her look even more haggard and elderly. These were the teeth of a cocaine addict. They had become discolored, the gums had also weakened, and the teeth had gotten uprooted prematurely. I asked my friend to stop the car. I walked toward her, and when I was in front of her, I said, "May I give you a hug?" The woman was speechless. I opened my arms and embraced her scrawny body. Her body stiffened, and then after a while, it softened a little more. I didn't know anything about hugging meditation at that time, but there was love in my heart for this woman and for her body. There was no obstacle between her and me. There was no discriminant and no difference between us. I held her in my arms, I felt her in my body, and I felt this oneness with her. All I said to her was, "Please take care of yourself." Then I smiled to her and walked back to the car. She was somebody who wasn't a friend of her body, who didn't know the deep value of her own body, and because of life circumstances, she had to use her body in exchange for drugs, food, and shelter. And so, how dealing with the suffering on a day-to-day level, and to really, you know, incorporate that into your daily practice, and to not shy away from looking at the things that are disturbing or unsettling or maybe messy. It's all part of the practice. As Thai says, no mud, no lotus. You can't have the lotus without the mud. And in a similar way, to be a friend to your body also means to be a friend to pain and suffering, right? And this episode that Sister D talks about just really drove that point home for me. I mean, it was such a powerful and moving part of the book.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing about that also, that, I mean, I think I mentioned this before, but she's such a powerful teacher, and she's such a strong voice for women, such a strong female Dharma teacher, and really broadening the tradition to include female voices and female bodies, female experiences.
Absolutely.
I also want to share just one more thing while I'm thinking of it about Sister D, which is something really joyful about her body. I mean, there are lots of things that are joyful about her body, and she talks a lot about the joys also that she experiences in this book, and the joys of walking meditation, the joys of being with friends, the joys of swimming. But I'm just remembering that when I was on family retreat, Sister D often is with the teenagers. She loves being with them, and she's great with them, and they love her. Anyway, the end of the retreat, Soren, you probably remember this. I think she probably does this many times, but I think it was, well, maybe it wasn't that retreat with you. Anyway, I'll just finish my story. The end of the retreat, the teenagers got together and did this amazing break dance. And Sister D had on dark glasses, and like she was, I think I remember her dressed like in black. She just looked so cool. And she was just dancing and walking out with the teenagers and getting down on the ground and moving all around and so fast, and just like, wow, look at her. She could be like in a music video. She's just having so much fun, and it was really joyous to see. So I just wanted to share that kind of side of her as well.
Right. We'll do another audience question.
Great.
And I feel we need to answer this question just by how pertinent it is to our discussion, and also how serious it is. The question's from David. I have a friend of mine who attempted suicide 1 week ago. How can you help a suffering friend through Sister Dang Nghiem's teaching? What a great question. How can I help as a friend to someone who is clearly suffering?
Nadia, do you want to jump into that one, or you want me?
I think this book might be a good book to give someone who's suffering. Sister D does talk about having suicidal thoughts in her life, and I think that often for people who are really in despair, part of that feeling of despair is feeling cut off from other people, right? Like, I'm just so alone with my suffering, and no one will understand. So as a friend, to be able to express understanding, deep listening, deep understanding, and to be able to share even this book with someone who's really deeply suffering, so that the person can feel that he or she isn't as alone with that suffering.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Is the the lessons of self-kindness. We've talked a lot about how much Sister D refers to pointing these teachings toward yourself and loving yourself, uh, but and which is kind of special about the way she's expressing it. But that's not at all to say that these teachings, loving kindness, things like that, in their basic form, are directed toward somebody else. You know, so being there for this person and hearing this person's pain and sharing your own sadnesses with them and how you're dealing with them and that sort of thing. And needless to say, getting them professional help if you haven't done so.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't know clearly the circumstances of this, but I would say the most important thing is to listen, to practice deep listening. And so reach out to your friend and practice that. Don't, you know, and I say that because you want to be listening carefully to what your friend is going through and to understand what your friend really needs, right? Different people need different things at different moments of their lives and, you know, for different situations. And so, you know, go into it, you know, with your whole heart, and listen carefully and listen deeply to your friend, because you know, just as everyone has within them the capability of healing themselves and transforming themselves, you know, everyone has a role to play in reducing the suffering or ending the suffering of all beings around us, whether they are friends or not friends, whether they are human or not human, whether they are living things or not living things. And so I would just encourage you to listen carefully, listen deeply, and to show that you care about your friend, because clearly you do. I hope your friend is in a better place. But thank you for the question, David.
Presence also is just so important. And she talks about the importance of her sisters, just being there for her when she was suffering, and it sounds, you know, clearly you're a good friend, and your presence will, I'm sure, really make a big difference.
Absolutely. We're nearing the end of our time, and so I wanted you to give an opportunity to tell us what's happening in your world. So, Nadia, what's happening over at Anchor Magazine, and what are you up to?
Well, we're very excited about Anchor. We have produced 2 issues so far. They're both online and in print, and our 3rd issue is coming out in May. As I said, it has another article from Sister D about practice in it, and the magazine is at the intersection of spirituality and social justice. And so spirituality is widely defined: interfaith spirituality, Buddhists, Christians, Jews, agnostics, atheists, but people interested in a kind of spiritual path. And social justice, also very widely defined: people working in education, global health, you know, prison reform, any kind of, anyone who's interested in making the world a better place, basically. So we're very excited about the magazine and hope you'll check us out.
Yeah, and where can people find you?
So what is our URL? I don't know, but if it's if you just Google Anchor Magazine and Still Harbor, then you will come to it. So I'm sure you can post a link, right, Jason?
Yeah, I've just posted a link to the magazine directly onto the broadcast, so
and you can
I'll leave that up for.
Sorry, you can also subscribe, and the print editions are beautiful, if I do say so myself. And it's nice to be able to hold something in your hands.
Great. And Soren, what are you up to?
Well, if you want to check out my professional work, we have one video that is getting a lot of attention at the moment. It's called "Sorry, Babe, You're a Feminist." So you can just Google that. It's a response to all the young actresses and musicians saying they support gender equality, but they're not feminists. And my wife and I are comedy musical writers, so it's her singing a song about that. So if you want to check out my professional work, start there. Not safe for work in many, many cases, and if you're offended by strong language, you don't want to check out my work. But with the podcast, the Deer Park Dharmacast, it's on YouTube. I'm sorry, on iTunes, and it's going really well. We have a hugely increasing listening base, and the number of downloads is just growing and growing. We made a big switch. The team, primarily Kathy and Fee and I, made a big switch to shorter podcasts. So they're usually about a half hour long nowadays, which Kathy designed to work with someone who's commuting or going for a run or exercising or something like that. So sometimes it'll be 2 or 3 podcasts will be one Dharma talk, but they're in half-hour chunks. And that seems to be working really well. So yeah, I encourage you to check that out. It's from the monks. It's Dharma talks from the monks and nuns at Deer Park, and so you get a wide variety of different viewpoints and different teachings.
Yeah, and the URL for that is dpcast.net.
Yeah.
And at Parallax, I mean, we're celebrating the launch of Sister Dang Nghiem's second book, Mindfulness as Medicine. We're also celebrating our spring sale, so everyone can get 35% off all of our titles on our website, parallax.org. You just need to enter the code SPRING in all capital letters during the payment process, and you can get a really good deal. I don't think you can find a deal like that anywhere. For 35% off all print titles at parallax.org.
May I mention also, I cannot speak highly enough about Sister D's new book. If you read her first book, it was a memoir and an amazing story, and showing how the Dharma and the community help her through some really heavy trials. Mindfulness as Medicine still uses her personal stories, as we've been talking about, but it's much more of a straightforward Dharma teaching, divided, as we said, among the 4 immeasurable minds of love. And I think it's just fabulous. I've gotten so much out of it. Can't recommend it highly enough.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, well, we'll close out with a short sit. And thank you again for all of you for joining us. There were over 200 viewers watching us from all over the world. So thank you for watching. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your smiles. And thank you for listening to us humble practitioners, learning along with everyone else. And so we hope we brought a smile to your face today, and you took a moment to sit and to breathe and to really listen deeply and to feel the global Sangha practicing together online. So thank you all. And so I'll ring the bell once, and we'll close out. Thank you all for joining us. Be well, and see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.